Welcome everybody to the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about the future of localization ecosystems. And this is going to be a semi-moderated roundtable panel discussion with our experts who we'll be introducing to you shortly. And because this is a roundtable discussion and it's Q&A, there's not going to be any set Q&A period per se towards the end, but anybody can enter questions throughout this process. If you're logged into Zoom, you can go to the Q&A section and please insert any of your questions for any of the panelists. If it's for a specific panelist, then please put who you are addressing, and we can make sure that we can moderate those and get those questions asked throughout this. Any other questions, comments, or technical difficulties, you can likewise use that chat functionality in the Zoom system. So with that, let's see what we're going to be talking about today. And I apologize if there's a little delay. Internet is running slow around the world in these times, so there might be a slight delay between the slides. But today we're going to talk about essentially the future of technology, the future of automation, the future of localization ecosystems in the language services industry. And some of the basic questions that we're going to be talking about are essentially how are LSPs and other providers managing this currently? How does that affect what's happening on the buyer side, on the client side? What type of ecosystems have been tried and either failed or succeeded in the past? And what lessons can we learn from that moving forward? When I talk about ecosystems in the language services industry, though, we want to make very clear that we're all talking about the same thing. We want to define our terminology. So with that, because it's something near and dear to his heart, and it's something that Xillio focuses on very well and talks very coherently about, I want to turn it over to our co-host Rikkert to explain to us, what are we talking about when we're talking about ecosystems? Rikkert?
Thank you, Tucker. So it's a little bit of a longer answer because I think it is such a fundamental thing in the localization industry. I still consider myself an outsider coming from the digital marketing industry. And if I look at how the digital marketing industry kind of evolved in the last, let's say, 30 years, then from 1990 to 2010, these were all, let's say, enterprise suites with one massive supplier, IBM or Oracle, that were providing everything. All sales was kind of relationship driven. Then it moved into platforms, so things started to be open, and sales became more kind of solution engineer. It became more of a solution engineer. Then with the cloud rising, everything actually became API focused. So sales was much more developer focused, and your platform needed to be open because a developer could say no. So things were actually real. It was a developer sales. And because of the cloud, and because of that openness of the API, you see the rise of ecosystems. And so kind of my main observation always about the localization industry is everybody talks about MT, like machine translation is going to change it, and there's a big change. But I think that machine translation in itself is just an acceleration of an existing process. And the real change is happening in the business model, because the real change is cloud, and cloud favors ecosystems. And I think if you look honestly at the localization industry, it is still in 1995. It's an enterprise suite sale. It's driven by relationship management, and that's it. So because so that is kind of my observation. And if you look at the top 1 till 5, of course it's proven, because the top 1 till 5, they all offer everything, and everything is sold through a relationship sales model. And kind of everybody follows the same pattern because they see that number 1 till 5 are very successful with that enterprise suite. And but if you take it at cloud, at more the ecosystem approaches, what are the 3 characteristics of an ecosystem? First one is it's easy to work with. So for a developer, it's easy to work with. For providers in the ecosystem, it generates new business channels. And for clients, it provides access to new data. So for clients, it's access to new data, access to new experiences. For providers, it's access to new business channels. And it is all facilitated because it has a developer focus, which means it's very easy to work with for a developer. Hence, API first, etc. That is a very long answer, but that's kind of my definition.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rikkert. And that was deep. That was a lot to chew down. I wrote down some key points there. I hope everybody was taking notes during that. But we'll get into this further and we'll break it down as we move forward. So if you only comprehended a third of what was just said, hang in there. We're going to get back to it. Right now, we're going to introduce the panel. We have a number of my esteemed colleagues on the call today, and I want to give each person a little bit of time to introduce themselves on this call and tell us a little bit about who they are, what their role is, what their experience is in the localization industry. And I'm also going to ask you guys one question that I'm interested to know on. What is an exciting project that you're currently working on right now? It can be something big, it can be small, it doesn't matter. Just tell me one exciting thing that you're really passionate about right now. So with that, let's start with Miguel.
Thank you, Tucker. Miguel here. I'm working at Kin, maybe more famous for being the Candy Crush makers, and it means that I am in the gaming industry. And it's not been always like this. I've been a long veteran in the industry. I started back mid-90s, 1995, working as a vendor for Microsoft in Dublin, when basically the localization industry was shaping in Europe. And back on those days, I already started to have some sort of interest in automation and tech and everything, because my first jobs were related to test automation. I remembered creating scripts for QA in Excel, Windows. So I was for 10, 12 years working at the vendor side. And then 2007, I moved and I left the serious side of the localization industry and I moved to the gaming industry. And I was working for Electronic Arts. And there I was responsible of everything that it had relationship with creating the technology for doing LQA automation. So there was some kind of connectivity and ecosystem there, because it's a complex thing when you think about it. And I've been working at Kin for the last 6 years. Next month will be my 6th anniversary. And at Kin, I'm responsible of leading the strategy around the digital content and the different games. And yeah, we have a portfolio of 17 games and different languages. So getting this kind of maturity in the localization and strategy and in the ecosystem is quite important for us. And for your question, actually something that I'm really excited and that we are working, and that is really related to this topic, is that we are in the process of migrating to a new CMS. And we are in the process of seeing how we can have continuous localization in the CMS and integrate that with the game engines. And as you can imagine, that's very related to this topic. So I'm really looking forward to see where this conversation is taking us, because I would love to have also some input and food for thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miguel. I was just thinking, we should start having less qualified, less experienced people on these panels. We can get through the introductions much quicker. That's quite the resume that you have.
Thank you.
I just realized I didn't introduce myself, so I'll go next. My name is Tucker Johnson. I am the managing director and co-founder of Nimdzi Insights. We provide market research and consulting for the language services industry. One thing that I'm excited about and I'm working on right now is creating some of the workshops that we do. We have lots of workshops that we customize for our clients, and I'm modifying some of that so that they can be done virtually and remotely. I'm working on this very exciting one right now for account management and soft skills for project managers. And if you're an existing Nimdzi client, be on the lookout for that because it's coming your way. I mentioned my co-founder, Renato Beninatto, so why don't we go with you next, sir? Work the mute button.
Rookie mistake.
Rookie
I
mistake.
work for the same company. I'm the other co-founder of Nimdzi, and I'm not going to go through my career. It's too long. Almost 40 years in this industry in all functions.
And
but
nobody. Everybody knows already. Nobody cares.
And nobody cares, exactly. The exciting projects that I'm working on, I would say I'm working on two very exciting projects. One, on the buyer side, we're reviewing the vendor relationships and the technology platform for a very large healthcare company here in the United States. And we have a chance to help them redesign their workflows before their peak season arrives. And the other very exciting project that I'm working on is on the growth side, working with an LSP, taking advantage of the slowdown to develop their strategy and training for after the pandemic. So these are my two exciting projects.
Awesome. Thank you, Renato. Álvaro, sir, where are you joining us from today?
So today I'm in Amsterdam, where I've been for a while now and probably will be here for a while in the near future. So good and bad things about it. But thanks for having me today. Great to see you all, and thanks for everyone who joined to listen to us. I've also been in the localization industry for a fair bit. I started when I was a university student. Translating, I've been a conference interpreter, project manager, localization specialist. I've done a few stints in localization engineering. I'll say this very carefully because I'm surrounded by people who actually know what they're saying in this field, but I've helped implement a few TMSs in my time, if that makes sense. And then I've been with Nike Inc. For 7 years in different roles across content production and publishing, localization and brand marketing. And constantly always connected to this idea of building scale, but also having really high quality standards, as you would expect of a global brand, right? And those two things, there's a creative tension between those two things. In my current role, I am working on our language services portfolio, so a bit more detached from the technology, always connected to it. Still connected to localization production, but a colleague of mine runs production, and my responsibility is to manage our service portfolio together with our external partners and make sure that we're consistently servicing our internal clients and expanding that portfolio. A couple of exciting projects other than baking bread, which we all are, apparently. I'm using everything I've picked up along the way to see how we can globalize creativity. So we have an amazing team of language specialists in-house at Nike, very talented linguists with different backgrounds. They help us raise the bar for quality, but they also write content. And in the process, they help us be a better global brand. So how do we scale that? Because we all know that creativity doesn't scale well unless you're Disney. And something I'm very excited about at the moment.
That's very interesting. Globalizing creativity. I'd love to learn more about that in a different webinar, but we'll discuss that later. Thank you so much, Álvaro. Last but not least, I'm going to turn it over to Rikkert here. And Rikkert is with Xillio. We're going to hear all about who they are, what they do. And Rikkert, I'm going to I saved you for last because we can segue quite nicely into the next slides where you can tell us a little bit about yourself, then tell us a little bit about Xillio.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm the founder of Xillio. We started 16 years ago. We started as a, if you can go to the next slide, maybe that. I started 16 years ago as a migration consulting firm, mostly doing web migrations into the likes of Tridion and Sitecore and Adobe, etc. Then in 2014, that led to a development of a content integration platform, basically allowing interoperability between content management systems, as I wanted to solve the problem that people could decide to migrate to a single system, but leave certain systems behind. And while we brought that to market, I actually went to my old friends of Tridion and told Tridion to integrate that piece of technology in their solution. Tridion said, thank you very much, that sounds great, but we're going to use it for translation. So I said, translation? Okay, that sounds interesting. So let me dive a little bit deeper into that. And that actually led to the introduction of our integration technology, further in the localization technology, and with partnerships with Lilt and Amplexor and Capita, etc. And that led to a deep understanding of the actual opportunity and need for proper automation in the translation industry, and with the development of the localization hub, and the opportunity for an ecosystem approach basically within the localization industry. And so I actually have a very cool announcement to make today, or some of a project that we're working on, that we expedited tremendously. And that is the launch of the marketplace. So what we launched literally today is a marketplace where any translation technology or any translation provider can advertise their services and have integrated their services into the localization hub. So what it means is that for an end client, if they buy our connectors, they can, of course, send the content that is gathered to any translator or to any translation party, or to integrate it within any translation technology. It's a typical middleware. It's a typical middleware offering that you are free to send it to any content provider. But what we have added to this, and that is possible, of course, because of the open API architecture, is that actually other LSPs and other translation technology providers can directly integrate with our solution. So that gives them the ability for enterprise clients to send content directly to that LSP. So that is that's a very, very cool initiative we are working on, and excited to launch that within the localization industry. The second thing that we are working on that will go live in about probably 3 to 6 weeks, is that, of course, we have very, very good relationships with all the content management systems, because we've done migrations to all of them for a very long time. There will be a big announcement coming in the next, I think, 3 to 6 weeks, but we have already started with a top 5 player in the world, where we will do all migrations, and also looking at multilingual content delivery there, how to make that easier for their clients. So I think it's an incredibly interesting time. The client we understand most is the digital marketeer, because we've always done migrations for the marketeer. So I think that's just a wide open opportunity to make life better for the marketeer, because I think until now, that category within the translation process has been a little bit underserved. If we go deeper into the experience of Xillio, we have always done the migrations in Holland, of course, and worldwide for a lot of the larger companies. So the majority is migrations to Adobe, to Tridion, to Sitecore, etc. But we have not really a sector's focus, but I would say, as a generic rule of thumb, the clients were usually more on the complicated side, with a complicated environment.
I wonder what you did for the police.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, for the police, we migrated every regional system into a corporate system. So in Holland, there are 26 regions for the national police, and we migrated them to a single repository, to a single system.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Rikkert. Next, Renato, briefly, here's your opportunity. Tell us a little bit about what you do, what we do, I should say, at Nimdzi.
Yeah, let's not waste too much time on that. We do consulting, we do market research, we provide geocultural insights. We have a team of 22 people in 9 countries, and we focus on helping our clients grow and solve difficult problems related to localization, translation, language services in general. And we're happy doing that. But let's go into our conversation, Tucker.
I couldn't agree more. Let's jump right into it. And for those of you that are already submitting questions and interacting in the chat, thank you very much. We will try our best to get to all of these questions as they come up. So to kick us off here, give us some background. And Renato, you've been around for a while, since we've been translating on stone tablets with chisels. How are LSPs currently managing automation? How are LSPs currently managing automation? How has that evolved over time, and how do you see that moving forward in the future? And other panelists, please jump in.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick statement. I think that a key characteristic of the language services space when it comes to technology is that it's reactive. So we're constantly adjusting to the demands of other departments in the organization. And as things scale, and as companies become more global, their challenges increase, and then comes a point when you need to take a look at what is in your stack, what is going on, and reinvent it. And because translation and localization are services that I like to say they're consequential services. They are a consequence of other actions that other departments do. We're not creating anything, we're transforming things. The ecosystem reflects a little bit the organization of the company. And what has changed in recent years is that it's the ability, it's this whole environment where you have connectors, APIs, and the ability to make systems talk to each other. And we are able to have an infrastructure that is designed for translation and localization services and have it connect to other technologies that provide content that needs to be translated. So what has changed in recent years, and Xillio makes an important part of that change, is the fact that you're able to have a translation ecosystem that is designed for the industry and have it communicate with the different elements of the organization, so that a person like Miguel can have his system regardless of what the rest of the organization is doing. And I'm putting you on the spot here, Miguel, but I think that one of the challenges that you have is exactly that, right? It's dealing with internal stakeholders.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, it's all around improving connectivity. And when you think about it, that's part of the reputation of the localization industry. Like it's a pain point, and it's because everyone somehow is using their own system. And then when you want to talk to that system, and that system want to talk to another system, and then everything gets very complicated because you have the content management system, and then you have the TMS, the CMS, the machine translation, and then you have the freelancers and the LSPs. I mean, when you think about how to make the connection of all this, it's painful. There are so many things to consider that is really painful. So I do really believe that we need to have this ecosystem, because for some reason that's not totally working in our industry, and that's super important. We need to find a seamless integration between the systems. So yeah, still working on that.
I think we're all still working on that, and I think one of the biggest challenges is this like system or platform proliferation that every organization kind of goes through. As more platforms get built and more integrations get built, it becomes more and more difficult to migrate away from those and integrate into new systems. And Miguel and Álvaro are two folks from the client side here, and you work for different organizations, you know, different with different ages and different cultures. Álvaro, what does it look like on your side? What are some of the challenges that you're dealing with in this space?
I think that the challenges are shared, right? There's an interoperability problem in between systems, and it's true that to a certain extent, cloud is helping deal with some of those or accelerating at least the change rate of some of those. But very early on, we had to make a strategic decision to develop our own middleware that would allow us to connect all of our stack and, you know, standardize content and then output it to whichever TMS we decided. And we're lucky because we had the resources to do that, right? And which pretty much kind of like in it of itself explains the challenge at the industry, right? Because what happens with every client who doesn't have the resources to invest in its own technology solution to integrate their stack with a translation management system or a content management system or both. And I think those problems are common to pretty much any organization, but I do see a constant challenge of incentives, meaning the localization industry is a very specialized industry, and there's 3 or 4 big players who have enough money to invest in technology. But what incentives do they have to actually make those systems open and interoperable, right? And we're seeing some change in that area, but it's not happening as fast as it could have happened. And then the same goes for the clients. Like the bigger clients will have the resources to invest in their own solutions, but then that just furthers the problem of the industry, right? Because then everyone below that big investment line stays with the interoperability problem. So how have language service providers and technology providers been handling automation so far? I would say it really depends. The lack of an ecosystem is a big problem because it pretty much makes it so hard to migrate from to just pick the best solution to your problems. And oftentimes you see internal corporate processes or programs adapting to the technology they have rather than using the best tool for the job. And I see this again and again with programs I talk to and anyone in the industry. I kind of discuss it with.
That's really good. Thank you so much for that. It made me think of something. And sorry, I'm distracted here running this. I'm going to pause the share so that we can see each other for those of you, because it's better than just looking at a blank slide. I want to turn it over to Rikkert here because I know that you have interesting things to say on this. That Álvaro brought up a good point, that there's not really a good motivating factor for people to buy into a shared ecosystem or API standards. There's been various attempts. We can talk about TAPICC as an initiative to standardize APIs in the industry. But Rikkert, what are the advantages of creating an open shared ecosystem? And it's kind of a twofold question, and I want to open it up after this. What are the advantages to the end clients? And what I'm more interested in is what are the advantages to the providers to make their systems interoperable and join a shared ecosystem?
I mean, I should be very careful and correct in my answers here. In essence,
diplomatic.
There are lots of advantages for the smaller providers. There are 0 advantages for the bigger providers. I come from the content management industry. So within the content management industry, you have content management interoperability system as a standard that they tried to implement, I think like 8 to 9 years ago. And there were 2 challenges and that are the same kind of within TAPICC. So just a very brief summary of that standard. What happened is that The top 1 till 5 said, well, let's wait and see because we don't really want it to happen. Then the number 8 and number 12 started to develop it and really try to sponsor it. And then number 1 till 5 kind of said like, oh, we need to do something with that. So they started their research and determined like, can we put it on the product management kind of roadmap? So the first problem, of course, was the commercial side. Like, do they actually want it? Of course, the answer is no. I mean, not the main strategy of IBM, the main strategy of Oracle is vendor lock-in. Make it as difficult as possible to make them leave. So I'm not going to say that the same applies for the LSPs, but of course it is. It's the main business strategy.
No, of course not.
I have people that closed an OEM deal, and now I do it again anyway. I have people that closed OEM deals with me that signed the deal and that said, Rikkert, all this bullshit about openness, you're going to help me close it down or not? Huh? I mean, yeah. I have board members. I have board members of LSP tells me, big ones, the real big ones. They tell me, the moment you talk to my client, you are my competitor. Huh. I told him, welcome to the ecosystem world. Huh?
This is, of course, behind the scenes. This is what does not make it into the blog post.
The main reason is they fight it. They don't want it. The only system in the world that was open about it is Microsoft. Microsoft says right from the start, we don't support it, period. And they're not afraid, they say it, they're big enough. And the others hide behind kind of complexity. Because the second problem why it can't be is then the product management priority, because it takes a couple of months to actually develop the interoperability. So when do you decide to put it on the product roadmap? So with the CMIS initiative, that's where it failed. And because you had the commercial reasons that people didn't want it, and then you have the product management priority rules where people wanted to delay it kind of, and because it took so much time, they actually did not implement it. Now, I think within the language sector, there's a third problem, and that's technology. So the most of the technology is so old that it doesn't even have an API. So it can't be done.
But Rikkert, one of the interesting things that I see, so in our research, we publish, and I think we're updating it for publishing in June, our language atlas. So we have identified the first year, 300 and something technologies in the language space, and the second year, 400 something. And I see that at the last count, we have 538 technologies, tools, solutions related to language services. Of course, we are in one of the most diverse businesses in the world because we touch every single human activity, every single business process that you can imagine. But when we want to talk about ecosystems and we have so much tool proliferation, it's kind of hard to think in terms of standards. Everybody creates their own standards are great if you're the one writing it, right?
I mean, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. So we're of course heavy sponsors of TAPICC, so we offer TAPICC is the kind of the ultimate way to integrate with Lockup. And there are quite some technology parties that are now are integrated through TAPICC, and some of them are actually doing it at the moment. Because the main difference here is almost more on the architecture side. So this is not even this is more the factual case of it. If you take and now I'm going to do another spoiler alert here, but Translate 5 is a relatively new open source CAT tool. Mm-hmm. It's based on open standards. So they integrated their CAT tool in Lockup in like a week. So they built a TAPICC host in a week. Why? Because the underlying architecture is open anyway. And so Lockup has been built on open standards. Why? Because I don't need to tell my developers to work on open standards. It's the only thing available. Yeah? And if you take If you take something that Lionbridge or GlobalLink or SDL developed, they developed it in 1992. And now of course, they have 4,000 processes in it. And now they take these 4,000 processes, put it on someone else's hardware and call it a cloud. But if you look at what Oracle and what SharePoint have done, for instance, if you take Office 365 and you take Microsoft SharePoint 2013, there is nothing in common. Absolutely nothing in common. Nothing. So what happened with Office 365 is that they rebuilt their collaboration platform from the ground up the moment the cloud became evident. It took them 8 years to actually develop that. But now it's built on open standards because it's built on the latest technology. And then, of course, integrating that into a standard is very easy. Mm-hmm. If I take the Translate 5 experience, it's like a week. But if you have 1995 technology,
yeah, but you have companies like XPM or native cloud, for example, right? Yeah. And so that is designed, and this is where. So I think we're going through a long transition process, and coming from this whole innovative thing that was world server, that it's giving a lot of work for a lot of people in this industry trying to replace it. A technology that is essentially 30 years old, that is running large corporate clients, the infrastructure of large corporate clients. So we have this change. And one of the things, and I'd love to ask Álvaro and Miguel their opinion on this, is that you have the legacy infrastructure that is being updated to a technology that is current today, but to which you're going to be married for the next 15, 20 years, right? So there is this, it's a huge investment. It's a significant change that you're doing inside the organization, and you have to have buy-in from a bunch of different organizations. How do you protect yourself from this? I wouldn't say it's not planned obsolescence, but it's like inherent obsolescence that you're buying. You're buying something that is designed for the reality of today, and that will change. I don't know, 5G is coming around and it's going to change everything, right? How do we future-proof this change? How do we future-proof the ecosystem? And I don't know if you have any ideas around that, Miguel and
why do you say you're married to why do you say you're married to it? Because of the cost of
cost implementation. It takes you a year to change a system at least. You're not going to change it every year. You're married to it, and this is the challenge that companies have today. And Rikkert was talking earlier about the fact of trying to lock in the client to the technology. So I don't know, is this something that you think about, that you talk about, that you're essentially buying yesterday's technology and for tomorrow's environment?
If I can add something here, I don't think the technical is the challenge here. It's more like the mindset and the human mindset and everything. So I was listening to what Rico was saying about the main players in the industry, and what I have seen when I've been evaluating myself technical solutions is when doing these RFPs and trying to get a sense of how this might work in the next 5 years. The biggest the providers are, the more close everything is. And they are really reluctant to change that. And I understand that. I mean, if you are one of the big players in the industry, you have invested a lot of in research and a lot of in development and a lot of in customize your own API thing. But it's trying to combine the old way of working, all this legacy, trying to bring that here, And what I've seen is that's not really working. And when I have approached smaller companies with a more kind of agile or fresh setup, I can see that they are more into this open idea. They are more into the idea of creating backlogs where clients put their request, and then they have a backlog that different clients are voting and they implement the features. You can really see that the way that they are managing that request from the clients, it's so different from the big one. So in a way that's giving us some indicators around, if I'm going into this direction, I am closing somehow myself, because the challenge is not technical here. Is that companies, they need to protect what they have built, and it's difficult to let that go. So quite often I feel much more comfortable working with small technical providers, because I feel that they have the right mindset for the current time we are living as of today.
And actually, to add to that, I mean, so just to be, there's a lot of what we have seen now with kind of the recruitment of technology players on the marketplace. There's a lot of cool stuff out there. There's a lot of cool stuff out there. And and of course, if it's been developed in the last 5 years, you can only it's nearly guaranteed open, because it's just a bit of the source repositories to be used, of the code repositories to be used. And but there's a lot of cool stuff out there. It just doesn't get a platform. And because of the heavy relationship-driven sales approach, it's very difficult for them to actually get in. But it's not that there's no technology. There's a lot of cool technology. It just doesn't get a platform.
We go back to incentives. We go back to the incentives conversation. Like, who exactly has an incentive to invest in those technologies at scale? Which in many ways it ends up being a problem of scale, because business volumes will come from a limited number of buyers, right? They're driving the scale. Those limited buyers cannot risk structurally the risk of going with a smaller provider. Technology could be awesome, but if you have massive volumes of work to push through, there's only so much you can rely on a vendor that you could probably be buying yourself, right? Because are they going to be able to support you 365? Are they going to be able to scale throughput as you grow? If there's an event like now in the world that everything suddenly shifts and you have a spike in work, are they going to be resilient through a moment like this? So you're limited as a big buyer in the number of risks you can take, and also limited in the number of vendors you can work with from a language services point of view. Because they're great language services providers that are medium and small, but then you need to spend time managing multiple of them. So you end up working with a handful at best. And then those, okay, you will find a solution to work with them, but those are the ones who don't have an incentive on making anything open and interoperable, right? So you end up back at square one. Like, where's the funding coming from to fuel this open marketplace when the bulk of the business is up here and there are no clear incentives up there to drive the openness? Because I'm fully supportive of the idea, and the way we, for example, work is, in as much as possible, we force open standards, right, in everything that we do. But that's not necessarily how everyone operates, and again, to a certain degree, we might be the exception here, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Talking about this small versus large LSP, it's kind of a catch-22, because the ones that have the resources at their disposal to take on such initiatives are exactly the ones that are not incentivized to do it, because the larger LSPs, perhaps, maybe it's not in their best interest to make everything interoperable with each other. Going to the questions here, and also
just to be clear, and just to be clear, it doesn't always have to be for spurious reasons. Like, they have good reasons to manage their own systems because they have massive efficiencies built into it, which makes them sustainable as a business and allows them to. So I don't want to, you know,
you just saved us all a bunch of nasty emails
about this. Like, they have their own reasons, but there's not necessarily a clear incentive to them to operate otherwise.
That is very true, and you just saved us all a bunch of nasty emails after this, especially myself. I'm not trying to imply that there is any like malintent here. The efficiencies to be gained from creating a closed-off ecosystem, especially for larger clients with larger volumes that have very specific needs, are huge. They're absolutely huge. So it's not just spurious reasons, like you mentioned. So thank you for bringing that up, Álvaro. Going to back to the marketplace with your announcement today, Rikkert. How do you see this helping in this situation? And there's a question from the audience too. Thank you, Anna. About what is the role of machine translation in this marketplace? Is it going to be a place where people can connect to machine translation engines, or are those going to have to be routed through LSP services?
No, both. So it can be any technology, it can be any MT, it can be any LSP. And and then it's up to the end client to determine what they want to send to an MT, what they want to send to an LSP, what they want to do themselves, if they want to use technology themselves. We are basically just a facilitator in the middle that any MT or any LSP can sign up to, or can actually integrate. I mean, in essence, everybody with kind of the middleware, you can integrate any MT already anyway. It is just that with the marketplace, it's more visual and it's more like it's more integrated.
So it provides some flexibility, which takes us to another question about which scenario, and anyone can jump in on this, which scenario is preferable, your favorite? A CMS connected directly to machine translation, or a CMS using a TMS system? So essentially, what is the role of a TMS system? You mentioned earlier, I think Rikkert mentioned earlier, that MT is just an iteration on an existing process. How is that affecting the technology chain from CMS, TMS, machine translation? I didn't ask that very well. How important is the role of including a TMS in the step between CMS and machine translation?
So maybe
it depends on your business and your content type.
Exactly.
Reason.
Yeah, I would agree.
There isn't a single answer to that. I would say one thing. Machine translation is it's not that different. Okay, someone's going to slash me for this. It's not that different from translation memories. It's very different, I know, but fundamentally it's the same thing.
I was going to say, you're getting some angry emails now.
It's a box that gives you back translations without human interaction. It's smarter, it works differently, I get it. But from I'm not a technologist, right? I'm not an engineer. In my head, it's just another way of doing, it's another layer in that mix. But it's not fundamentally different. And I think that's why I was meant earlier on by the fact that MT is an evolution of already working dynamics, right? So I remember when translators were scared of translation memories, and then it became, the norm. The same will happen with machine translation. It's not going to remove the need for translators. It's not going to remove the need for translation management systems. It's just going to be built in, and then you will have to build a process and a stack that works for you depending on your specific needs. Like, I don't know, like, do you have an e-commerce platform that you want to deploy globally and that actually that you're going to drive conversions simply by having a translated interface rather than having it in English, and therefore it's acceptable to have it machine translated as long as you're transparent about it? Awesome, go for it. Are you content-driven business? Then you probably need humans to edit that output. But that's depending on the use case.
If I may add something, the way I see it, like the TMS and machine translation, all that part, I don't think the problem is there. I think the problem is like in the middle, which is again how everything is connected. Because when you zoom out and you see like the whole content journey, you will have like the enterprise organization repository of files, content, whatever. In the case of mobile apps, game development, you will have there the GitHub, you will have there the GitLab, you will have there the JSON. So that's there. And then at the other side, we have the translation management system, the CAT tool, the machine translation, if you want, other content and all the translators and everything. But the thing is like in the middle. How do you connect this with this? And that's where these APIs or these kind of solutions is the only way I do it. I think it's the only way of doing it, that we find a better way to connect the enterprise organization needs with the language service solution. And the key is in the middle, the way I see it. So that's why I don't think machine translation or how we connect this with that. I don't think that at the language service provider, that's a problem. I think that is more around connecting the company organization needs with localization teams delivering a solution to that, because in the end, localization teams, even if they are internal from the client side, they are going to be working with the language service providers as kind of extension team. So they are pretty much almost on the same team. So the key is that we find one single way of connecting pretty much everything. And once we are able to solve that, then we will be closer to build this really seamless integration and nice content journey.
So this is actually the main reason why we expedited the launch of the marketplace, and also the main reason why we are so strong supporters of TAPICC, because it makes these things possible. So let's say we have a scenario where people go right now for post edit in the TMS. So that requires in context review of the website within the TMS. So that means that the end client can pick an LSP that provides in context review of the connector within their TMS of choice. Okay, you just select it on kind of the marketplace. Now you are bound, you are forced to save money, and of course that request that kind of request will come in the next couple of months for sure. So you're looking at ways to save, and what you're doing is like, okay, how about we don't do all the extensive post edit process, but we actually do a final approval process step. Now, within the same automation, you simply select a different kind of post-edit process step. Instead of that, the in-context review happens at the LSP side, you would have the in-context review happening at the CMS side. Yeah? So you either publish it in a QA environment. This is one solution. But another partner, Rikkert, that provides in-context review, has very good in-context review software, is integrated through TAPICC. So you can provide a different in-context review post-edit process within the same technical infrastructure. So I'm not saying that everybody will be integrated through TAPICC immediately, but this is exactly what we're trying to actually facilitate. This is exactly the reason why we launched it now earlier, because we see you don't need to be a rocket scientist to kind of foresee that the need to expedite the automation and the need to find savings will come sooner than later. And so we're trying to kind of facilitate that. So it's not what is the best process, post edit here or post edit there. No, what I want to facilitate is like 6, 7 different workflows that can be executed. So you can select the right workflow based on the correct content type. And then you basically determine, okay, this workflow costs X, this workflow costs Y. Now, can I move certain content types to a different workflow? That's what we're trying to achieve here.
And you actually want to take it up one level. You want to be managing business logics. You don't even want to be taking content from A to B to C. You want to be thinking, I need this to be done this way and to be delivered at this time in this manner. And for the system to be based on your business logic and the metadata within the content to then be channeled to the right process.
Thank you very much, Álvaro. Thank you very much. So what I will launch is basically a button. You want 4 hours, 8 hours, or 24 hours. That's it. Yeah? Instant 4, 8, 24. That's it. Because that's the only thing the marketeer cares about. That you really do not have to ask him about post-edit or anything. It's what's the delivery time and what's the cost. That's it.
It's very funny that you say that, because that's what our research confirms. It's on-time delivery. That's the most important thing. Making sure that everything integrates, is seamless. And for the localization organization, the most important thing is that it is seamless. It is removes manual processes and handoffs, so that and that's the value of automation, is to remove handoffs, so to avoid human errors. That's the only value at the end of the day, because like you said, Alvaro, the process is pretty much the same. You change translation memory for machine translation, the process is the same. You just replace one activity by another one.
So I'm gonna disagree with you a bit. I don't think that's the only benefit of integration and automation. I think it also frees up time and resources to deliver better work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think content delivery is the only metric that matters. I think it does in some industries, but not necessarily in all of them. And the more you automate a pipeline, not everything is a cost reduction exercise. For example, if you can use human talent to approve translation memory segments, or you can use human talent to refine the output of machine translation. Now, what's more valuable in the long run, right? Thinking future state. Can you actually shorten what's currently done by humans throughout a 24-hour cycle to seconds, and then allow a human to spend a whole hour refining a segment for less cost? And you end up with actually better content. So it's not just a race to the bottom to remove costs and human from the equation. It's a race to employ human talent where it actually makes a difference.
No, but Alvaro, we're not disagreeing. We're saying the same thing differently. What I'm saying is remove human handoffs, not remove humans. Is that every time that you exchange a file, that you send an email, that that's an opportunity for an error, right? So what you want to remove what automation does is remove these manual handoffs where you create opportunities for mistakes. I want to be mindful of time. We are at the top of the hour, Tucker.
Yep, so thank you very much for being mindful of time. We're chatting privately with the panelists here. We've decided we can go over by about 10 minutes. So if that's not an option for you guys who are dialed in and you need to jump off to your next call, then I will say thank you very much for joining. For those of you that want to stick around for another 5-10 minutes, we're going to close it up here. I apologize, we're not going to get to all of the questions that were submitted here. Please feel free to reach out to the panelists afterwards if you have additional questions for them. But I do want to end with this one last question from Andre here. And open question, anybody who feels strongly can answer this. What is if you had one suggestion to software developers, particularly software developers in our industry, developing language technology, if you had one suggestion to give them, what would that be?
Who starts?
Oh, we've stumped the panelists.
I would suggest to go with the open approach of the API, and then being willing to do some customization to ensure connectivity between the enterprise systems and the vendors one. But definitely going into this direction of open APIs and looking the available technology out there, because it can be done. And there are many companies and that they are the proving concept that you can go open, you can customize a little bit what you need, but not reinventing everything from scratch, which seems to be the tendency that you have a need, and then the provider will have to connect to your system. So if they have the resources, or if you have the human power, you will develop something. But not everyone is in that position, and also it's a waste of money, in my opinion. So my recommendation would be to embrace this AP openness and then just customize a little bit to cover your needs, because it's possible. No need to reinvent everything every time you need to connect something.
Awesome.
Yeah, I have two things. Simple and be mindful of the concept. And with that, what I mean is it is really easy for a developer to take kind of a different concept in providing the automation. And then if you have a different concept in terms of projects and automation and tasks, etc., it makes it incredibly difficult to integrate, even though you make it in an open way. But if the conceptual thinking of the model is slightly off, you still mean actually an apple, while the other talks about a pear. It makes it complicated. So also be mindful of the concepts.
Awesome. Anyone else have strong feelings about this, Renato?
My comment would be related to the business side of developers in the localization area. I have a sense that everybody's trying to create disruptive innovation. And the space that we have, it's all around incremental innovations. We've had very few disruptive innovations in this industry. And those are rare and far between. So very often I have this conversation.
Aren't necessarily from our industry, right?
Yes, yes.
Like what Rikkert mentioned earlier, he had two things that I wrote down. It says MT is an iteration on an existing process. I wrote that down. And the second thing he said was cloud is the game changer. And I couldn't agree more. But cloud it's not language technology. It's something that's happening to our industry. So the disruptions to the language service industry, I think it's, as an industry, sorry, I'm stepping out of my moderator role here and giving opinions. But as an industry, I think we have a certain amount of hubris that we are going to change this industry by developing this new tech, implementing this new standard. And by definition, disruptions come from outside the industry. By definition, disruptions come from outside our industry. So, you know, those of us industry insiders who have been around for a while looked at outsiders with a certain amount of skepticism, like what do they know? They don't know the industry as well as I do. Those are the people that we need to be watching very closely. Those are the companies that we need to be watching very closely. People that don't self-identify, companies that don't self-identify as language services industry or localization companies. Because these are the ones that are bringing in new fresh ideas and, you know, defining how we're going to be doing it 10, 15 years from now. Sorry, I interrupted, Renato.
No, but I think you're spot on.
You complimented, yes.
How Amazon deals with Alexa being able to understand everyone around the world will define the future of voice localization.
And likewise, those are the companies, if we're talking about Alexa and Amazon, they've got something that very few LSPs have, and that's R&D budget. Right?
And the right incentives.
Yeah.
So is your recommendation make your technology Alexa compatible? Oh shit! I triggered my Alexa here.
I'm not sure.
I think very important is also that there is no advancement in machine translation. It's not that people are working on advancing machine translation. People are working on advancing compute power. So if there is a big innovation at ASML in Holland, that will have more impact on machine translation than anything Google does. And so the big breakthrough is always coming. There are like 5, 6 generic, every new innovation is based on 5, 6 generic technologies. So if there is an innovation in any of those 5 fields, then everything skyrockets.
Sure. Like Renato mentioned 5G, you mentioned cloud, machine learning. We have a question about machine learning that I'm sad that we won't be able to get to. These are the things that are affecting our industry. with this, this is great. Thank you to all of our panelists for making my role as a moderator very easily, because I could just sit back and shut up and listen to you guys. It's been very informative. I think it's time to start wrapping this up, though. I encourage any of the attendees that are still with us, if you had questions that we weren't able to get to, please feel free to reach out, and we'll try our best to answer those offline. With that, Rikkert, as our co-sponsor for this webinar, I'd like to open it up to you if you have any closing words. Once again, congratulations on the new announcements. Anything you'd like to say before we wrap it up?
No, maybe one thing. I absolutely do not think that translators will be out of a job. I actually see a trend coming of hyper-personalization. So it's actually not translation, but hyper-personalization. I see that as the new upcoming job for kind of the localization industry. That's just my 50 cents.
50 cents worth a dollar to a lot of the folks listening today. So I couldn't agree more. I see our other panelists nodding their heads in agreement. So if that's something that you're worried about, automation taking your job, do not worry. It's not something that's in the stars. So with that, once again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our attendees for logging in. It's been a very insightful subject for me, and I will bid you all a good day wherever you are. Stay healthy, stay safe, wash your hands.
We only had more time.
Likewise.
Thank
Hi
you.
guys, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a good one. Ciao.